After the inheritance, my husband kicked me out of the house. I don't need you anymore, now I'm rich. For years I believed that love meant enduring in silence. I worked without rest, supported dreams that weren't mine, and learned to lower my own voice to keep a marriage standing. When life finally seemed to offer a break, everything fell apart at once, and I found myself without a home, without ground, and without answers. This is the story of a woman who needed to lose almost everything to start seeing herself truly. Between humiliations, difficult choices, and unexpected encounters, I was forced to face who I was and who I was becoming. Today, I share this journey not as a victim, but as someone who went through the pain and discovered strength where only exhaustion existed. I'm happy to have you here. Follow my story to the end and comment the city where you are watching from so I know how far my voice managed to reach. The alarm clock rang before the sky even cleared. I dragged myself out of bed in silence, trying not to make noise. Leonard slept deeply, as always, oblivious to the world that started too early for me. I prepared coffee with hands still numb, organizing everything on the table before leaving. I closed the door slowly and faced the cutting cold of the street, feeling as if the whole world weighed on my shoulders. The path to the bus stop was always the same, but today my steps seemed slower. I thought about how my life had turned into a mechanical routine, with no space for dreams or rest. Every morning, I gave my whole self for someone who didn't even notice. Leonard didn't know how many times I chose to be silent so that he could have peace. As the sun rose shyly, I could only think about how much I had erased myself. At work, the clock seemed to mock my exhaustion. I served customers with a trained smile, but inside there was only tiredness. Automatic words came out of my mouth without me really hearing what I said. When I looked at the coffee shop window and saw my reflection, it was as if I were looking at a stranger. It wasn't the woman full of hope who dreamed of a life together anymore. It was just someone trying to survive. I took a deep breath during the break, sitting alone on a cold bench, trying to remember why I still insisted so much. What did I expect? Recognition? A gesture of affection? Maybe a simple thank you? But these never came. Only silence remained, and the pain of carrying an entire home on my back alone. Will he ever realize what I do for us? Leonard was sitting when I arrived at night. Breakfast was still in the mug, cold. He wrinkled his nose, complaining about the taste. "You made it weak again," he said, as if my presence were a mistake. I swallowed hard, too tired to argue. The house, although small, seemed immense in the silence that separated us. I just walked straight past, ignoring the weight of indifference. While I changed clothes for my second job, my cell phone vibrated. An overdue bill alert appeared on the screen, along with a bank notification. My stomach turned, but I kept my face serene. Leonard couldn't know about that. I hid every failure, every hole in the budget, as if I could protect the fragile idea of stability he had. Frustration accumulated like dust under the rug. I couldn't complain, I couldn't fall, I couldn't stop. Because if I stopped, everything would collapse. Leonard never knew the price of keeping everything running. He thought money came from the effort of others and dreams funded themselves. Meanwhile, I was losing myself day after day. On the street again, the night was even colder than the morning. The city lights seemed to mock my useless effort. I walked to the next bus, feeling the world pass by me without noticing me. I asked myself in silence how many women were exactly like me, sustaining everything while being invisible inside their own home. I can't go on like this anymore. But how do I get out of this? At the nursing home where I work at night, the corridors have a different silence. A silence full of old stories. Mrs. Clary, one of the most lucid residents, called me while I organized the medicines. "You have a sad look in your eyes, girl," she said, looking deep into my eyes. I smiled politely, as I always do, but inside something trembled. Her comment kept echoing in me like a doorbell that won't go quiet. Did everyone see this? Was my sadness stamped on my face? I pretended I didn't hear, continued my shift with the same professional posture. But inside, that tightness in my chest grew. It was as if someone had taken the blindfold off my eyes. Between one care task and another, I tried to push the thoughts away. But the truth is that it had been a long time since I smiled for real. Every laugh was just a mask. Every word was armor. And now, a lady who barely knows me saw what Leonard never saw. That broke me more than any offense. When I sat in the locker room to change clothes, I took a deep breath and faced my reflection in the mirror. I saw myself there, tired, small, almost erased. How many years of my life had I given to someone who didn't even look me in the eyes? Maybe I had lost myself a long time ago and didn't even notice. Maybe I have been sad for so long that I don't even notice anymore. Leonard walked through the door with that theatrical enthusiasm he kept only for when he wanted something. "I had a brilliant idea," he announced, as if he were going to revolutionize the world. It was a business for vegan food delivery apps. An idea that wouldn't last a week in the market. But he spoke as if he were already a billionaire. "You can fund the start, right?" he said, as if it were obvious. I swallowed hard. I tried to question to show that the bills were already at the limit. But it was enough for my gaze to hesitate for a second for him to say, "You are afraid. That's why you never go anywhere." It hurt. As if all the sacrifices I made were invisible. As if my caution were a defect, not a protection. Leonard didn't want a partner. He wanted a sponsor. He got up, walked around the room talking loudly, praising his own idea as if he were a misunderstood genius. And I once again felt small. Everything I built with so much effort was treated by him as something disposable. My opinion didn't matter. Only my money. And not even that was enough to earn respect. I felt my eyes burn, but I didn't let a tear fall. I already knew what would come next. The indifference, the silence, the contempt. And even so, part of me still sought a reason to keep trying. Maybe it was fear. Maybe habit. Maybe just tiredness. If you don't believe in me, maybe you're not right for me. I took the debit card with trembling hands and made the deposit Leonard asked for. I knew that would empty our account. That the rent would be late. That the market would have to wait. But he had a way of making everything seem like my fault. As if not funding his dreams was sabotaging him. And I, as always, gave in. The bank statement flashed before my eyes like a drowning warning. Balance 0. A hole opened in my chest, but I refused to cry. I put on the uniform for the second job with the speed of someone who is already late for their own pain. Tears don't pay bills. Despair doesn't earn overtime. I only had to keep going. On the crowded bus, I hugged my bag like someone holding pieces of themselves. I wanted to scream. I wanted to disappear. But I stayed there, seated, pretending everything was under control. Sometimes I think I was born to endure. As if my function in the world was to cushion the impacts of others' irresponsibility. In the nursing home kitchen, I banged the pots harder than I should have. I tried not to take out on work the anger that grew in me. I was the woman who held everything together and still smiled. But even that was starting to break. I wasn't whole anymore. I was coming undone little by little, in front of everyone. I am literally paying to be despised. Marcia noticed at the first glance that something was wrong. "You're paler than your uniform," she said, trying to joke. But her tone was one of true concern. I waited for the corridor to empty and broke down, told her about Leonard's absurd idea. About the money we didn't have anymore. She listened to me in silence, eyes watering. When I finished, she said, "You need to get out of this." I shook my head instinctively. I still believed or wanted to believe that he could change. That it was just a phase. That one day he would see everything I did for him. Marcia said nothing, but her look screamed. She knew I was fooling myself. And that hurt even more. We went to the patio to get some air. She spoke about dignity, about self-love, about new beginnings. I listened to everything like someone hearing an unknown language. How to start over from a place that never let me be whole. How to let go of a hand that had been pulling me down for so long. When we said goodbye, she held my hand and said, "Don't wait for him to break you completely to get up." I smiled but promised nothing. Because, despite everything, a part of me still insisted. I still expected a gesture, a change. I still deluded myself. Maybe he just needs a chance. Walter passed away on a gray morning, one of those where the air seems to weigh more. The phone rang early, and I knew immediately that something bad had happened. Leonard, upon hearing of his grandfather's death, just pursed his lips. There was no commotion nor a tear. Just silence followed by a distant look. At the wake, while everyone was still settling into their grief, he was already whispering with Brent, laughing discreetly. I stood paralyzed upon listening. Brent asked if he thought he would inherit everything, and Leonard replied with a crooked smile. "If it's more than $1 million, I'm going to change my life. In that moment, I felt a knot form in my stomach. It was as if Walter were just a bridge to something bigger, a number, a sum. Not a word about missing him, not a fond memory. Only speculation. I looked at the coffin covered in flowers and imagined how much Walter would see that, if he could. He who, even quiet, seemed to notice everything. I wondered if he had left something said, some letter, some warning. Leonard, on the other hand, walked among the guests as if he were at a party of opportunities. And there, in the midst of loss, I saw myself more alone than ever. While everyone cried, he smiled. While absence tightened my chest, he made plans. It was there, among the smell of withered flowers and the whisper of goodbyes, that I realized. Leonard wasn't in mourning. He was counting the days to start over, but not with me. If it's more than 1,000,000, I'm going to change my life. I walked away slowly, like someone trying to escape without being noticed. That environment suffocated me, not because of the grief but because of the coldness by my side. I found a calmer corner in the church garden and took a deep breath, trying to reorganize my thoughts. Irene approached with that firm look, loaded with truths no one wants to hear. She leaned next to me and murmured, "He never knew how to value you." I felt my eyes water, but I held it back. Irene wasn't one to talk just for the sake of talking. That sentence carried weight, judgment, but also care. She had known Leonard since he was little. She knew Walter even more. "His place was never in the shadow," she continued, staring at the overcast sky. I wanted to answer but found no words. I just nodded in silence. Her presence, despite the pain of the moment, comforted me. It was good to be seen, even by someone from the outside. Irene commented that Walter always observed more than he spoke, that he knew who was close for real, even when he said nothing. "Walter saw more of you than he showed," she whispered, and that went through me. Maybe there was more in the will than Leonard imagined. Maybe in silence Walter had left something beyond money. But at that moment all I wanted was to disappear from the scene of that morbid theater. I was there out of respect, but every second showed me that Leonard was no longer part of me. Walter saw more of you than he showed. In the car on the way home, Leonard didn't stop talking. He talked about how that money would change everything. "Now is the chance to start over," he said with youthful enthusiasm. He didn't cite joint projects nor plans for us. It was always I this, I that. My life is going to be different. I listened in silence, as if I were in a passenger seat that was getting colder with every mile. I tried to bring up a more emotional subject, ask if he was okay. But he cut me off with an, "I'm great, actually better than ever." That locked me up inside. It was as if Walter had only released a key to the world Leonard always wanted. A world where I didn't fit. His excitement was so disconnected from grief that it scared me. Later, already at home, I heard him say on the phone, "This money is my rebirth." He used words like investment, status, new life. I waited to hear at least a mention of our name, our home, the two of us. But nothing came. Not a comma. I was an extra in my own husband's story. A presence he barely remembered to include. I went to the bedroom, sat on the bed, and stared at the floor for long minutes. I tried to understand at what moment I stopped being a priority, or if I ever was. The answer was too painful. And even without hearing my name, I understood. He had already left me, he just hadn't said it yet. He didn't even mention my name. 2 days later, Leonard received official confirmation of the inheritance. $2 million. I saw the shine in his eyes as he read the letter, as if he had been blessed by the heavens. He didn't show me the document but shared the numbers with Brent before even looking at me. On the same day, he went out without saying where he was going. He came back late, smelling of drink and expensive perfume. In the following days, he became increasingly absent. He would leave in the morning and return at night, always on his cell phone, laughing with friends. He avoided eye contact, serious conversations, moments together. When I tried to get closer, he pulled away. It was as if that wealth had created an invisible barrier between us. A high, cold, insurmountable barrier. I observed everything in silence, but inside something began to break. That money hadn't united us. On the contrary, it was pushing us further apart. It was as if Leonard had received the permission he needed to cast me aside. And, even trying to ignore it, I already saw clearly what I previously was reluctant to admit. I sat for hours at the kitchen table alone, staring at the half-full glass of water. It was too symbolic. Me always trying to fill and him always emptying. For the first time I didn't cry. I just stayed there breathing, listening to my own silence. I am beginning to see everything with other eyes. I tried to bring up the subject on Sunday. I said we could think about traveling, renovating the house, investing carefully. Leonard looked away, looking at his cell phone. Not now, I'm resolving important things, he replied dryly. I insisted with sweetness, trying not to sound invasive. Can we plan something together? I asked. He sighed deeply, got up from the chair and said, I need space. That dismantled me. I wasn't talking about invading, I was talking about sharing. But for Leonard, sharing was synonymous with loss. He now spoke of my account, my money, my future. And I felt like a hindrance, as if I were preventing the flight he dreamed of so much. I who carried his falls was now a weight. I who funded his daydreams was now an annoyance. He started going out with Brent more frequently. Expensive dinners, private events, places where I was never invited. Social media showed a version of him I didn't recognize. New suit, rented car, forced smiles. I watched from afar, like someone seeing an old acquaintance being consumed by a character. That night I lay down alone and felt that something inside me began to die. It wasn't love, that had been hurt for a long time. It was the illusion that there was still an us. And without that illusion, what was left for me? He doesn't want to share anything with me. The next morning, Leonard appeared different. Serious, contained, almost rehearsed. He said we needed to talk. The tone of his voice gave me a chill. I sat on the sofa without saying anything, waiting for him to continue. He paced from one side to the other, as if searching for the right words. But his eyes didn't lie. There was a distance there that wouldn't be reversed with words. My heart raced. I knew something definitive was about to happen. The signs were all there. I just didn't want to see them. When he finally stopped and stared at me, the silence lasted longer than acceptable. I tried to remain calm, but my mind raced, trying to anticipate the pain that would come. Look, tomorrow you will understand, he said vaguely. He didn't explain, didn't elaborate. He just let out that sentence and left the room, leaving me there alone with my thoughts. I wanted to ask, insist, but something held me back. Maybe the fear of confirming what I already intuited. Maybe the certainty that somehow that would be a final period. I stayed there listening to his steps move away, the sound of the door closing. And I understood that the worst pain isn't the end. It's the silent announcement that the end is coming. And it was coming fast, precise, irreversible. Tomorrow you will understand. I woke up with Leonard calling me to talk in the living room. His expression was sober, almost cold. I sat on the sofa and before I could say anything he started. He said he needed to move on with his life, that I suffocated him, that I didn't believe in his dreams. And then with a quick gesture, he pointed to 2 packed suitcases by the door. My eyes took a while to understand what they were seeing. The blue suitcase was mine. The brown one too. He had decided for me, as if my time there had ended. It's better this way, he said, as if he were doing a favor. I stood motionless for a few seconds, trying to digest the scene. It was real. And he had already written the end. His voice sounded distant, as if coming from a tunnel. He spoke about freedom, about starting over. But the truth is that he had already started over. He just forgot to tell me. You are not part of my future, he concluded, before getting up and going to the kitchen as if nothing major had happened. And I remained there, staring at my own suitcases as if they belonged to someone else. The emptiness of that room swallowed me. There was no explicit pain, not yet. There was a cruel numbness. I had been removed from his life like an old piece of furniture, without emotion, without ceremony. And suddenly the whole world seemed like a place where I didn't belong anymore. You are not part of my future. He came back with a folder in his hand and left it on the table. The divorce papers, he said casually, as if we were talking about a rental contract. I opened it slowly. My eyes wandered over pages full of dry, cold legal words. He leaned against the doorframe and crossed his arms. Are you going to cry? He asked with that mockery he always used when he wanted to hurt me. I didn't answer. I held the pen firmly, keeping my eyes fixed on the dotted lines. The pain was there, alive, pulsing. But I wouldn't give him the pleasure of seeing my tears. Every word read was like a nail in the coffin of a story that only I tried to save. Leonard had already buried everything a long time ago. Only my signature was missing. My name was there, cold like everything remaining between us. He huffed impatiently. Come on, it's just a paper. Funny how a paper can weigh more than years of living together. I signed calmly, handwriting firm, even though my hand trembled inside. When I finished, I closed the folder carefully. I stood up without looking at him. I took the suitcases, took a deep breath. I had nothing left there, not even an identity. Leonard looked at me like someone who was already somewhere else. And maybe he really was. There was no more room for me in that home I helped build with sweat and silence. Where do I sign? Marcia arrived minutes later. She got out of the car with hurried steps and teary eyes. She didn't need to say anything, just opened her arms. I threw myself into that hug like someone finding a buoy in the middle of a shipwreck. Leonard watched from the window, arms crossed, like someone watching a change of scenery. Without remorse, without emotion. She helped me with the suitcases without rushing. We got into the car, and I looked for the last time at the facade of that house that one day I called home. I didn't cry. Not in that moment. I was anesthetized, emptied. Leonard watched us from the porch with a slight smile on his face. A smile of someone who believes they have one. The street seemed longer that day. Every lamppost, every corner seemed to say goodbye. Marcia squeezed my hand from time to time and I squeezed back. But I couldn't say a word. The silence said everything. My world had collapsed, and the man who promised to protect me was the one who threw the first stone. Upon arriving at the new house, I looked at Marcia with mute gratitude. She brought me to a shelter. But inside I was still in ruins. And Leonard, on that porch, believed he had conquered freedom. Little did he know that what he called victory was, in fact, the beginning of the end. He thinks he won. The room Marcia prepared for me was simple, but full of affection. She turned on a soft lamp, left a folded blanket on the bed, and put a flower on the nightstand. When I saw myself there, in safety, my body gave way. I sat on the bed and broke down. I cried uncontrollably, sobbing like a child who lost the ground beneath them. And in a way, that was exactly what I had lost. Marcia sat next to me without saying anything. She just stayed there, offering the silence that heals. Afterward, she left slowly and left me alone. I lay down without changing clothes, without turning off the light. I slept for hours, maybe the whole day. The tiredness wasn't just physical. It was of the soul, of the heart, of the constant fight for a space that was never truly mine. When I woke up, I found a little note from her on the door. Here you will breathe. That touched me deeply. For the first time in a long time, someone offered me something without asking for anything in return. I took a deep breath and faced the bedroom mirror. My face still swollen, but my eyes were there. I was still there even after so much. I went to the kitchen and made some tea. Marcia appeared, laughing softly, like someone who doesn't want to intrude. I sat at the table with her, and for the first time in weeks, I managed to drink something without feeling a lump in my throat. It was just the beginning. But it was already something. Here you will breathe. The next day my cell phone vibrated. It was a social media notification. Leonard had made a new post. I avoided looking immediately, but curiosity overcame me. I opened his profile and was faced with a photo of him smiling next to an unknown woman. It was a trip. Beach, champagne, captions about freedom and starting over. My stomach turned. The woman, young, beautiful, looked like she came out of a magazine ad. And he was a man I barely recognized. Tanned, light, as if he had gotten rid of a burden. I kept staring at the screen for long minutes, trying to understand how he managed to turn the page so easily. It seemed like I had never existed. I closed the app and dropped the cell phone as if it burned. Marcia entered the room at that exact moment and found me with eyes full of water. You looked, didn't you? She said without judgment. She just sat next to me and hugged me again. The pain was acute but not new. Just another cut in the same wound. I got up shortly after and went to take a long shower. While the water fell, I tried to imagine a future where that image didn't affect me. Where her presence didn't hurt me. Where I didn't compare myself. But the truth is that, at that moment, I just wanted to understand where I lost myself. He already has another woman? Late in the afternoon, the phone rang. Unknown number. I answered with a low voice, still tired. On the other end of the line, A firm and gentle voice introduced himself. George Whitmore, lawyer for the Foster family. I need to speak with you urgently. It is about Walter's will, he said. My heart raced without understanding why. I explained that I was temporarily staying away from home, and he said it didn't matter, that my presence was necessary regardless of the separation. George was objective, but there was a serious tone in his voice. He noted down my new address, confirmed a time, and hung up. I stared at the cell phone for a few seconds, trying to put the pieces together. Walter was never one to talk much, but he always treated me with respect, even with a certain silent affection. Being called by a family lawyer, and not Leonard, made me uneasy. What could be in that will? Why was my name involved? Marcia entered the room and saw my face. Problems? She asked. I shook my head, uncertain. I don't know, but something in the will requires my presence. And in that instant I realized that the story Leonard thought he had ended was far from over. Something in the will requires your presence. The office building was imposing, with mirrored glass and silent corridors. I went up with a tight heart, not knowing what to expect. Upon entering the meeting room, my gaze crossed with Leonard's, impatient, tapping his fingers on the table. Irene was also there, seated with a calm that only experience brings. The atmosphere was strange, heavy, as if everyone knew something I didn't know yet. I greeted them in silence and settled in. Leonard didn't even raise his eyes. George Whitmore entered right after, carrying a thick folder under his arm. The environment became even more tense. I could barely breathe properly, overtaken by a sensation that something important was about to happen. George arranged the papers and looked at us seriously. He started with a brief introduction, explaining the context of the will. Walter's name appeared between formal sentences, and that brought me a pang of longing. But it was when George said there was a special clause that everything stopped. Irene looked at me in that instant and nodded her head. She already knew. Walter had done that thinking of me. My heart accelerated. A special clause? What kind of concern would Walter have left recorded? And why did Leonard seem so bothered? That meeting was far from being a formality. It was becoming a turning point. Why did they call me? George continued with a firm and serene posture. He said that Walter in life expressed great concern with the way Leonard treated me, and that, for this reason, he included a moral clause in the will. Irene confirmed with a grave look that Walter saw more than he showed. He knew the truth that so many ignored, and he wanted to guarantee my protection. My chest tightened. It was surreal to hear this. Someone cared enough to protect me even after death. George then explained that, according to the document, the distribution of the inheritance was conditioned on a specific detail: Leonard's marital status after the passing. Your name is directly linked to the inheritance, he said, looking directly at me. Leonard finally reacted, straightening up in the chair with an air of doubt. He tried to interrupt, but George asked him to wait until the complete reading. Irene by my side held my hand discreetly. All of that was more than a legal meeting. It was a moral revelation. Walter saw me. Walter wanted justice. That cold table became the stage for something much bigger than we imagined. I didn't know the exact content of the clause, but for the first time, I felt that the truth was coming to light. And Leonard was starting to realize that maybe he didn't have control over everything. Your name is directly linked to the inheritance. George picked up the copy of the will and began the formal reading. The room plunged into absolute silence, broken only by the sound of pages being turned. The words sounded distant, wrapped in legal jargon, until they reached the crucial part. Leonard crossed his arms, impatient, as if everything was a waste of time, but something in his countenance began to change. I kept my eyes fixed on George, absorbing every syllable with a mix of anxiety and hope. My whole body was tense, as if I were about to cross an invisible line between two worlds, the one of submission and the one of justice. George paused for a second before continuing, as if he knew that moment would change everything. He said that there was an essential condition for Leonard to access the inheritance. He must continue married to me for, at minimum, 12 months after Walter's death. Otherwise, all assets would be automatically transferred to me. Leonard widened his eyes. I couldn't breathe. George then looked directly at him and completed firmly, if he has divorced. And there in that frozen instant the world turned inside out. He has divorced. The clause was clear without margin for doubt. Walter had left it in writing. If Leonard divorced me before completing 1 year after his death, he would lose the right to the inheritance. All assets would pass entirely to me. I was in shock. Leonard mute paled like never before. George pointed to the registry records, where the divorce already appeared as official. That silence weighed more than any scream. Leonard tried to argue but his voice failed. "This is absurd," he murmured. George interrupted him with a legal reminder. He himself had signed the divorce papers of his own free will. I, still astonished, stared at the hands that sustained so many sacrifices. And now they also sustain justice. Irene let out a slight sigh, like someone who already knew the ending of this story. Leonard got up, walked from one side to the other, as if looking for an exit. But there was no exit. He dug his own trap. Everything he desired so much now escaped through his fingers, not by bad luck but by choice, his choice. George reinforced the validity of the clause, presented the documents and concluded, "The inheritance belongs entirely to Mrs. Elaine Foster." Leonard widened his eyes, shocked. I said nothing. I didn't even need to. The truth was simple and incontestable. And the divorce is registered. Leonard became desperate. He tried to laugh, then tried to scream. He tried to get close to me, saying that this could be resolved. "We can start over, get married again, pretend none of this happened," he said, desperate. Every word sounded like irony. He didn't want me. He wanted the money. And now, he ran after what he destroyed with his own hands. George was categorical. There is no more time. The divorce was registered, and the defined deadline has passed. Leonard still insisted, asking if there wasn't a loophole, a way to reverse it. But there wasn't. He himself had dug his ruin. I looked at him calmly, without anger, just with the clarity of someone who finally saw everything. "You never saw me," I said without raising my voice. "And now you are seeing what you lost." Leonard tried to touch my arm but I pulled back. He didn't cause me fear anymore. He caused pity. He was just an empty man, facing his own undone arrogance. Irene observed everything in silence with watery eyes. She knew. Walter knew. And now I also knew. Leonard stumbled as he returned to the chair, his hand trembling. George closed the folder with tranquility. The silent judgment had ended, and the sentence was signed by him. "You dug your own ruin yourself." After Leonard left, stumbling like a castaway, Irene pulled me into a hug. One of those hugs that says everything without needing words. "Walter would be proud of you," she whispered. And for the first time in a long time I believed it. It wasn't about the money. It was about dignity. It was about justice. It was about someone finally seeing me. George offered me a glass of water and said he would take care of all the procedures calmly. "You don't need to worry about anything now," he said with kindness. I thanked him, unable to stop trembling. It was as if my body was still understanding that, for the first time, I was standing for myself completely. Irene offered to take me to Marcia's house. I accepted. In the car, she spoke about how Walter always believed that character was more valuable than any fortune, and that he saw in me the silent strength that Leonard never knew how to recognize. Her words warmed me, as if a new flame began to be born. We arrived at the door, and she held me by the arm before I entered. "Now you decide what to do with the inheritance," she said with a sincere smile. And in that instant I understood that freedom finally was mine. "Now you decide what to do with the inheritance." The insistent sound of the doorbell pulled me out of a rare moment of peace. Marcia looked out the window and came back with a worried look. "It's him." I went to the door and found Leonard standing there, with a haggard face and watery eyes. "Listen to me, please," he said, his voice trembling, shoulders curved. He tried to touch my hand but I took a step back. He started talking fast, as if words could undo everything that was done. He said he regretted it, that he felt lost, that there was still time to rebuild. He begged, knelt, cried. But no tear cleaned what he did. It was too late. He wasn't crying for me, he was crying for the comfortable life he lost. The serenity I felt looking at him surprised me. I didn't tremble anymore, didn't hesitate, didn't look for answers, because I already knew all of them. Leonard tried one more time to convince me with empty promises. But I wasn't the same woman he kicked out with packed suitcases. I rested my hand on the door and said firmly, "You lost me when you thought you could use me." And I closed it. Without anger, without hatred. Only with the certainty that now I didn't need to prove my worth to anyone. You lost me when you thought you could use me. 2 days later, I received a call from Brent. His voice was too smooth, like someone trying to convince a child. "We are willing to make a deal," he said, as if the inheritance were a coin I should divide. He offered percentages, benefits, legal promises. But deep down it was just another attempt to keep Leonard afloat. With every sentence my stomach turned. Not because of the proposal itself, but because of the audacity. They thought I could be bought. That, after everything, I would accept any type of negotiation. I took a deep breath, keeping calm. I waited for him to finish the whole speech, every rehearsed comma, every argument poorly disguised as empathy. "Brent," I said with a firm voice, "ask him not to look for me anymore. Tell him I don't negotiate dignity." There was a brief silence on the other side. He tried one more attempt, but I hung up. The sound of the click was almost liberating. It wasn't just about money. It was about being finally the owner of my choices. In the living room, Marcia looked at me and didn't need to ask. "It was Brent," I replied. She smiled and handed me a cup of tea. Life had no price. And I, finally, was starting to live mine. Dignity is not a bargaining chip. George called me for a final meeting at the office. There were the last documents, the official stamps, the formalization of everything. I signed calmly, observing my name on every line. George smiled at the end and extended an envelope to me. Inside, the inheritance check. A high number, but what weighed most on me was the symbolism. It was the first time something was officially mine. Upon leaving the building, I took a deep breath. The wind hit my face like a hug. On the sidewalk, I observed the hurried people, the cars, the sounds of the city. But inside me, everything was calm. I carried in my purse the symbol of a won fight. But what really gave me peace was what I left behind. Fear, silence, submission. Marcia waited for me across the street, smiling like someone watching the end of a movie and already expecting the next one. I got into the car with a slight smile on my lips. She asked if I was okay, and I just nodded. There was no more rush. There was no more urgency. For the first time, I could choose with lightness. I looked out the window and felt as if everything was starting over. Not just the story, but myself. And with that, a question arose, clear and luminous. What am I going to do with my freedom? What are you going to do with your freedom? I handed in my resignation letter with firm hands and a light heart. The manager tried to insist, asked if it was because of salary, because of stress. I just smiled. It wasn't an escape, it was a decision. I went back to Marcia's house, packed my bags calmly, and bought a train ticket. No fixed destination, just the certainty that it was time to leave. I closed the door carefully, hugged my friend like someone thanking her for a whole life. "Your road is going to be beautiful," she said, eyes shining. The train left at dusk, and I sat by the window, watching the landscapes change as if they were part of my soul transforming too. Behind me, pain. Ahead, possibility. Every station was a new beginning. Every city a new chapter. I slept in simple inns, ate in small cafes, wrote in old diaries. And little by little I was finding myself. I discovered that I didn't need grandiose plans, nor ready answers. I just needed myself present, whole, free. In the solitude of the wagon, I smiled at my reflection. That woman there didn't ask for permission to live. And the most beautiful thing was that she owed nothing to anyone. My future no longer has an owner. In one of the cities, I met a small NGO dedicated to women in situations of emotional abuse. I volunteered without thinking twice. The stories I heard seemed like echoes of mine. I started helping in sessions, then I created a new project focused on rebuilding self-esteem. I gave workshops, wrote anonymous letters, embraced causes as if they were extensions of my story. I studied in online courses, participated in meetings, was called for lectures. Every word I said was a brick in the wall of protection I built for other women. It was as if my pain had turned into a tool. I didn't deny my past, I used it. I transformed it into a bridge so that others wouldn't fall into the same abyss. I cried in many of these meetings, but they were different tears. Of relief. Of belonging. Of knowing that, despite what I lived, my story now made sense. In every welcomed face, I saw the Elaine I once was, and the one who now had learned to lift others up. My name began to circulate in local newspapers, websites, small interviews. But the real glory was in the hugs, in the silent words of gratitude. I am going to transform my pain into a bridge for others. Months later, I sat alone in a corner cafe, in a city I didn't know well yet. I was drinking a hot cappuccino when I saw Leonard entering. He was haggard, thinner, eyes dull. Cassie was by his side, visibly irritated. He tried to caress her and she pulled away. They spoke quietly, but it was obvious. She despised him, exactly like he despised me one day. He saw me. For a second our eyes met. But I didn't smile. I didn't frown. I just remained there, serene, like someone seeing an old chapter of a book that has already finished. Leonard looked away, ashamed. And Cassie got up, throwing her bag on her shoulder with anger, leaving the cafe alone. He stayed there alone, small, lost. I paid my bill calmly, got up, and passed by him without saying anything. Not out of resentment, but out of peace. Because in that moment, I understood that true justice isn't revenge. It's moving forward without carrying the past on your back. And I finally walked light. On the sidewalk, the sun touched my face. And without needing to look back, I followed my path with my head held high and my heart at peace. And I continued without looking back. Now, I am curious about you who listen to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you gone through something similar? Support the channel. Subscribe, like, comment, and share this video. I am leaving on the end screen another story that you will also like, and it will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until the next video.